Hi there, this is Leandra from PaperArtsy, and today I've got part 2 of a background series of videos using my Brayer. This is inspired by Ellen Vargo, who's done lots of work with Brayering paints this year, so if you want to check out more ideas, do go to her blog as well. As you know, Ellen Vargo has designed a series of stamps for us, and I will be using those stamps in part 3 of this series. But just to recap, part 1 was how I showed you how to make a monotone brayered background using orange. For example, this would be the same technique using blues. Today I'm going to go on and incorporate lots of other colours. So here you can see I've got mermaid, Bora Bora, guacamole, tinned peas, candy floss, orchid, lilac and snowflake. All of these colours are opaque, and using opaques makes it a lot easier to achieve this background because you're adding layers on top of layers which obliterate each other as you go. So in effect you can't really create mud. You can't go wrong. Snowflake we use to lighten things off as well, like we did in the last video. In part 3, the next video, I'll be showing you how to add further layers of colour and interest using stamped designs. Some of them are Ellen's, some of them are from the Lynn Brown series, and some of them are Sarah Newman's. So let's get started with part 2. One of the key things you need to understand when you're doing this technique is have an idea about what colours you plan to work with. I always have a sort of a rule: if you start with 2 colour families that are friends with each other rather than less friendly, it's much easier. So blue is a really good starting point because you can mix blue with green, and where they mix together, where they're wet, you're not going to create any problems. You're just going to make a bluer green or a greener blue. It's the same when you mix blues into pinks. You're just going to end up making purples. So if you start with blues and pinks, where the colours are wet and blend together, you will get purple. So those two are happy families. The problem's going to come where you have green and pink. Where these two mix together, if they're wet, you can create some not so nice looking colour combinations. And so I'm going to teach you how to introduce 3 colour families where they all work quite harmoniously, and there's a trick to doing it using snowflake as a blocker. So let's start first of all with blue. You might have noticed for each of my pairs of colours I've got a light and a dark. It really doesn't matter whether you start with the dark or start with the light, either is fine, but it's the same technique that I introduced you to in the first video, which is applying the paint, a very small spot, onto your craft sheet and very gently getting that paint all around your brayer, and then kind of flicking it onto the background randomly, and certainly start at the outside edge working towards yourself. And the other thing you want to do is keep rotating that piece of paper, start away and work towards yourself. Flick, flick, flick. The darker colours are much more dominant, so often I'll actually start with the dark and then soften them back with the lighter shade. But really there is no rule apart from I do like to keep things vertical and horizontal. I find if I start going on angles with the brayer, it all starts to look a bit too messy. So start with the darkest colour. In this case I've started with the darkest colour, and now I'm just trying to fill up some of these gaps. And do remember my rule from the very first video: you're not allowed to move on to your next colour until absolutely all the paint has gone off your craft sheet, and then your brayer will be dry, and that means this paper is dry as well. It's one of the features of a chalk paint, fantastically fast drying. So our choices now: we could either use mermaid as a pale on top of the blue, or we could go to a contrasting colour of green. It doesn't matter. Either of those is a good option. Let's go to a dark green. Okay, same thing. Ink it up. This one's called tinned peas, and it really is quite a green, pea green sort of a colour. And flick it on, and I try to think a little bit about the whole corner side technique, which is one I've taught for many years. It's just where you apply the colour to sort of two corners and the opposite side, but in this case I am just trying to keep sort of perhaps groups of three, just balancing it out, thinking quite analytically about where do I position the green. I want it to be really dominant in some areas and then perhaps blending through the colours in other areas. And just keep working at it until you've used up all your paint on the craft sheet. It's quite nice as the paint starts to run out because you get these beautiful, very soft patches of colour, and those are quite nice. Less of the streaky stuff. Okay, let's do the same thing again. Let's go back to the light blue. Just a small spot of that. And then we'll do the same with the paler green. This one's Mermaid, everyone's favourite colour. It's a really pretty turquoise blue, very pale. And this is just acting as a fantastic way to soften all the layers together. So a bit like we did with Snowflake in the first video where we softened it back. If you start dark and then introduce your lighter colours, you're giving it that soft focus effect as you work. So you can use any of these really pale colours the same way you would use a snowflake to soften back. And this is where I always start to get so addicted to this technique, because you're constantly juggling the background, going from dark to light and dark to light until you're happy with it. And of course this is something you can't do with ink, because ink just builds colours because they're all translucent, whereas with a chalk paint, with it being incredibly opaque, you can continue to build your layers and soften the layers that are underneath. Same thing with guacamole. Again, it's lighter than the tinned peas, so it's just giving that sort of soft focus. And remember, flick, flick, trying to fill those white patches. But also with the softer colours, you tend to be able to go all over, which is really nice, because then you start to make your background look a lot more random. Okay, so for me, blue and green are my go-to. This is my safe place. This is what I really like, and this background right here, that's perfectly fine to then move on and stamp with any other things that you would like to do. But what if we wanted to make it a little bit more complicated? What if we wanted to bring in these colours, the pinks? Now how are we going to do that without conflicting with the current background? Well, the answer is use Snowflake first. So we're going to put some patches of Snowflake, just the same way that we've applied patches up until now. So they don't have to be Snowflake everywhere, but just a few zones. And then when we sit the pink colours on top of the Snowflake, they're not going to conflict with the background underneath. So in arty-farty terms, we're kind of using Snowflake as a blocker. Now you might need to repeat the Snowflake action more than once, because as you can tell, the layers, as it dries, some of the colours underneath bloom through, and I've also got a few colours going on my brayer and on the background. So if you want the white to be a much truer white, a bit more like this area here, then just repeat it again. So that's what I'm going to do. You've also noticed that at this point the background is more usable if you're going to stamp something perhaps with a feature like a face type stamp on it. The lighter the background is, it's much easier to work with for your stamping and other images to really dominate on the background. If your background's too busy, then it's harder for that to happen. Okay, so we've softened that off, and we've got sort of 4 or 5 patches here of the white colour going on. So let's try a bit of Orchid. Now this is going to the darkest pink, And because it's really dark, we just want to go for a tiny amount. So you can see that is a much smaller spot than the other colours that I've used earlier. And also, if you're going to be a bit cautious about it, just perhaps try inking up a little bit of the brayer, not the whole thing. And again, start at the edge and just slowly bring it in so that you're getting rid of the bulk of it on the edges, and then that soft colour flicking it through as you've sort of run out of paint on the brayer. Pick up a little bit more, and again sort of start in these whiter patches. The pink's really going to pop on the white patches. It's not going to be so great where you put it directly on top of green, so if you have to put it on top of another colour, put it on top of blue, because then you're just going to get purple. But sort of avoid the greener areas. A little bit up here. So you can see the smallest amount of that pink just gives it a bit of lift and a little bit more interest. Okay, so let's use purple, which is the lilac, and the same thing, just the tiniest amount. Lilac is a little bit safer because now I can use it anywhere near the pink, and pink and purple are pretty happy together. I can use lilac anywhere near the blue, and that's also pretty happy together. The hardest colour to use purple with is green. You probably know yourselves, if you've mixed a purple and a green together, you always get a sort of a muddy, icky colour. These are dry layers, and where you put the wet paint on top of dry, you're not going to make mud, but also you've got an opaque that's obliterating, so you've got a little safety net there as well. And the lilac just looks so nice next to the purple, next to the blue. Sorry, getting my colours muddled up already. But you can see by bringing little bits of purple in near the pink now isn't standing out on its own as a sort of a really obvious contrast. The lilac's working together with it quite nicely. And purple and green do look fantastic. They're opposites on the colour sort of chart, so they look really, really contrasting together. They're quite nice colours to work with, but you've just got to know how to do it so that you don't make your mud. Right, let's finish this. 2 more bites of the cherry. First one's going to be candy floss. So it is a paler pink. Candy floss on its own, still quite a bright pink. Probably got a bit more than I needed. So it's a lighter colour. So again, I'm just going to bring some of this in near the pinks. Just flick it gently. It's always better to be a bit more cautious until you get a feel for how the colour's going to look. But we're starting to see much more interest because you've got quite a few things going on. And you do have the same concept. 2 layers of paint will always produce a brighter version of a colour. So most of these I'm only doing 1 layer of paint because it's just one application. But if you bring a pink on top of another pink, you just get a much brighter version of that. So if you want the colour to be more intense, don't be frightened to come back and add another little patch of colour. Okay, so my final step for this would be to soften back with Snowflake, or I could even go back to Mermaid. Let's show you Mermaid first. Maybe we'll take our steps back to the softness slowly by using a colour rather than going straight to the white. And you can straight away see with this how beautiful the soft blue looks on top of the pinks, so you can use it to knock back those pinks. It also brings back some of the colour from the very early layer. It's just a really nice way to blend it all together. I am liking that. I need a little bit more blue. And the same thing with the guacamole. If you wanted, you could bring in a touch more guacamole. Should we do that? Why not? Blue and green mixed together makes turquoise. So if you get your guacamole mixed up a little bit with the blue, it's okay. See, it's just reinforcing those first layers. The more layers you do with this technique, the better it's going to look. But just don't be too heavy-handed. It's that flick, flick, flick. Soft and gentle. Right, well, I'm really happy with that. I think that's a lovely background. It's just got the nice warmth from the colour. If I wanted it to be much softer, then a layer of snowflake. I'll do that on half the sheet so that you can see the difference. And then on the other half of the sheet, I'm going to show you something completely different as another alternative. So let's just get the snowflake going on here. Definitely your soft focused version. I do love putting the white on top at the very end. It always, for me, I love it. I just think it's just that little bit lighter and more soft. So on this side, what if we wanted to give it some oomph? What if we wanted to brighten this up? Well, you've got a couple of options. How about a bit of Beach Hut? So if we apply a translucent on top of this, what will happen is you'll just see all the colours from underneath will still come through, but the brightness of this colour will be accentuated perhaps more on the blue areas than any other area. So this one's Beach Hut. Very pretty blue, and you can even see on the craft sheet how much more translucent it is than the other colours. And when we bring this over the top, you just get, so you can see it on the corner there already, just a much brighter tonal value than what we've had. So if those of you are into real fresh, funky, bright, modern, then you can do that with your translucents. But you see, it hasn't removed anything underneath. All of that still comes through. Lastly, what about something like Yellow Submarine or Pumpkin Soup? Both of these are translucents. Both of these are yellow-based colours. So they'll really make your blues look a lot more green. Where you put yellow on top of the blue, you'll get those green tones coming through. If you want it to be more rustic, then the Pumpkin Soup. If you want it to be really zingy and bright, Yellow Submarine. And another option on here in the same vein as that would be Zesty Zing or Limelight. Zesty Zing is a very pale yellow, and Limelight is literally a bright lime green. If we put Limelight on top of that, it would look completely, really poppy. Actually, I think we might do that. So you see, this is a really pretty green, and it's just going to add that lovely layer. It's almost fluorescent Limelight. Even blending it through onto the soft white area, you can see straight away how much brighter it is in that zone than it is down this end of the paper. So overall, this technique is all about building lots of layers using your opaque colours. If you want to soften them at the end, use Snowflake. If you want to brighten them, then use your translucents such as Beach Hut, Limelight, Yellow Submarine, Pumpkin Soup. So that's the end of part 2. We'll see you back next time for part 3, where we introduce a lot more stamping.